All right. Team race call L3. So we're dealing with rule 10 on opposite tacks, or I'll screen share. Let me do this without showing the answer this time, like I did so many times last week. All right, cool. So call L3 is on opposite tacks. A couple different things in the Appendix D, the team racing appendix in the rules, dealing with protests, penalties. So our question, we've got the diagram there. On a beat to windward, A is ahead of Y. So we are dealing with three boats in this case. So remember they said A, B, and C is one team and X, Y, Z is another team. And typically when there's only one boat from each team, it's X and B, or Y and B, sorry. But in this case, we got two boats from one team and one boat from the other team. So we've got B on starboard tack. Looks like they are sailing close hauled in position 1. And again, remember, keep in mind which numbers are what. So these two are not actually two boats that are overlapped and contacting. It's two different points of time. So we've got yellow one, we got A1 here, we got B1. So looks like Y is going to be passing behind boat B, but boat A is not passing behind B. So in a fleet racing situation, this would be something where boat A is going to have to either duck boat B or tack in front of them, because B is starboard, A is port. Normally there's no real interaction between them, right? But since they are on the same team, they have, between the two of them, A and B, they've decided that it's going to be better for boat A to keep going and boat B is going to go behind A. So obviously that is, it's good to be communicating and talking with your other team members. What do we want to do with this situation? Technically this would be a foul if the starboard boat has to duck the port boat, but I don't remember which one. It's probably this one that's being referenced right now, D1.3C, something around there says, oh, I know what that's talking about. We'll get to that in just a second. I'll let it go for now. So in team racing, you can do things like this, where this is technically a foul, but we're allowed to choose what we do with our own teammates. However, we notice here, so Y doesn't have to change course. So we never end up in a situation where this is not like a Rule 16 situation where when B went to duck A, they changed course and would have hit Y or something like that. The key point here is that when B passed the stern of A, there is contact. So they went to duck, but they didn't quite make it. They bumped. And then Y has enough room that they tack out of the way of the starboard boat, and they protest. And we would assume in this situation that they protested this highlighted, the reason for this highlighted sentence there. So what would the call be, and who would get penalized? Let's go, since Audrey was the one that picked the question, we will give her first right of answer, first duty to answer, first obligation to answer, whatever we want to call that. So Audrey, take a guess or an answer if you know it, or best guess if you don't. What would this be?
Is it, hold on, A, penalize A?
Would there, so I guess first question, is there a penalty or is there no penalty?
Yes.
Well, they hit, two boats hit, so there's definitely yes.
Yep. Okay. So then, and then you're saying penalize A?
Wait.
All right, let's check it out. Let's scroll down, see our answer. Hey, look at that, penalize A. So protest by boat Y is valid under, and again, probably unless we really find a reason to hop into the actual rules and read them, we'll just take as we know the general, the general context here. This rule just says what this sentence says. If there's contact between boats of another team, then this boat can protest. All right. Normally when if team 1 is protesting team 2, the umpire can't, or if there's a foul between team 1 and team 2, the umpire can't make a call unless one team protests the other. But in this case, the umpire could actually penalize without even a protest, right? So when there's a foul here on 2 boats from the same team, or contact, sorry, the wording is contact. You know what? I'm confusing everybody. Why don't we take this opportunity to real quick read through this? So Appendix D, we can find ourselves. It's funny how there's actually more pages of appendices, whatever the word is, than there are of actual rules. All right, so D 1.2a. A boat may protest another boat, but not for an alleged breach of a rule of Part 2 unless she was involved in the incident or the incident involved contact between members of the other team. So that's the key there. If there's a foul by another team, such as the starboard boat had to duck the port boat, that's fine. But when there's contact in that incident, that's when the other team can protest them. Rule D 1.3c does not apply. So let's real quick look at 1.3. That's penalties. 1.3c. There shall be no penalty for breaking of rule of Part 2 when the incident is between boats on the same team and there is no contact. So basically what we just said, fouls are allowed between members of the same team if there's no contact. Once there is contact, that is a foul. Somebody's broken Rule 14, and because of that, we can go back and get them on whatever rule was broken that caused Rule 14 to be broken. So we penalize a boat that breaks a rule, and boat A has broken Rule 10, port starboard. They report E was starboard. And this is what I had mentioned shortly earlier. If there is no protest, the umpires may act under Rule 2.3b. I'm looking at that right now. We don't have to read it because it literally just says what's in this sentence that I've highlighted. There doesn't have to be a protest to penalize a contact foul between 2 boats on the same team. There does have to be a protest for umpires to penalize a foul between 2 boats on different teams. Cool. All right. Next on our list, next one down is, Alex has jumped in here. Hey, it's Jimmy. Jimmy Yurko's here. How's it going, Jimmy? We're getting more people from SMSA. That's awesome. This is Team Race Wednesdays. So Alex, pick a letter between A and M.
L.
L. All right. That's
Common letter.
cool. Let's go back, and now we just read that there are 10 possible options in L, and we can't pick, what was this, 3? We can't pick L3 because that's what we just did. So let's pick a number between 1 and 10 that's not 3.
Oh wait, am I choosing something again?
Yeah, that's you, Alex.
2.
All right, L2, cool. Let us check it out. Actually, let me go there first and make sure I don't share the answer. Ooh, nice. Good choice. Let me show you on the screen. So, boom. I don't think we'll do L2 either. So pick a number between 1 and 10 that is not 2 or 3.
7.
7. All right, let's check out L7. Let's go L6. Let's scroll down so we don't show the answer. No. Okay. Hopefully we didn't see that. If we did, just pretend we didn't. All right, L7. It's maybe a little less of a boat on boat thing, but may as well look at it because you never know. So this actually has happened to us before. Only, I guess it was light winds. Who went to the district team race in last fall, 2018? It was interesting.
Yeah, boy.
An event plans to hold a round robin stage followed by a semifinal and a final. The stage is scheduled to have 3 round robins. Light winds forced the round robin stage to be terminated when 80% of the second round robin has been sailed. does the decision to stop the second round robin mean the round robin stage is complete? So based on the racing rules, are we allowed to use these races in the final score? And this is not something that I would expect any of you to have like studied over. So we will just scroll to the answer here. But yes. So we probably don't need to scroll through all these questions. But it turns out, like we say, remember when we're looking at part 2 of the racing rules, that's when boats meet, and it's like 3 pages. And then you're like, what are the other, I don't know how many pages are in the rule book. What are the other 90 pages? Well, it's a whole bunch of, official terminology and how do we run regattas and stuff. So it's not necessarily the sort of thing we need to have memorized. As a competitor, you're never really going to have to be able to come up with this off the top of your head. But sometimes it's just interesting to have that background information. There are lots of things that people are thinking through when they're trying to figure out, do we have to cancel the regatta? Do we have enough races to count it a real regatta? That sort of thing. Cool. So not boats there, but next one down the list. Let's go. We already got Audrey. Claire, pick a letter between A and M. Actually, you know what? Let's take out L and M, because I think a lot of those do get into more of the technical things. So go between, what's right before L? K. Between A and K.
There are some good ones in there. There's some good, like L8 I'm looking at. It's really, really interesting.
E.
E. All right. Let's go to section E, and let's see how many we have. Team race call E. There's an E8. There's an E9. There's an E10. There's no E11. All right, so pick a number between 1 and 10, Claire.
5.
5. All right. Let's go to E5. Make sure I've got the question on the screen and not the answer. Here we go. And screen share coming up. All right, so E5. Looks like we're looking at Rule 11, Rule 18, part of 18. Exoneration should be interesting. All right, let's find out. So we have boat Y, yellow boat, reaches the zone of a starboard hand windward mark. And so remember, in team racing, these are the typical windward marks we see. We do that digital end course. And so at the windward marks, we're usually turning to the right. At the leeward marks, down on the bottom of the course, we're usually turning to the left. So this is we call it Mark 1, we could say. This is Mark 1 of our team race course. So it looks like they've got to the zone, and looks like there is no overlap. We can see that if we draw that line. And remember, when we get to that zone, we're taking that snapshot right when the first boat reaches it. So it's not when the blue boat gets into the zone between these two. It's when the yellow boat does. So if we were to really look at when we determine markroom, we would actually probably want to back up a little bit until the yellow boat was, just hitting that zone. But we are given the information that they are clear ahead, so B would not have markroom under the markroom rule, and they're a little above the ley line. We can see that. Blue is on the ley line. They're able to sail right to the mark. So the yellow boat had probably gone a little farther before they tacked. So they're both on port tack. We can see that. Next leg is a beam reach, as we know from our race course setup. So we're going to Mark 2, which is somewhere over here. The yellow boat stops with her bow a length and a half to windward of and level with the mark. So I believe we're sitting right about 2 right there. So yellow 2, blue 2. As the blue boat starts to sail around the mark here, the yellow boat heads down, and they're closing the door. I guess the phrase is used, which we have probably heard that phrase before. So as they head down, the yellow boat obviously is going for they're calling markroom. They're saying you had no markroom, you can't go in there. We see that strategy at different marks, right? B hits the mark, and no, yes, they hit the yellow boat and the mark. Yellow bears away so much that they cut off all room, and so B is just sandwiched in the middle there. And it looks like it's actually the blue boat that protests. So Claire will call back on you again. Do you either know the answer or have a guess? See if we can make a guess what the who's in the wrong here. Is it the blue boat that's in the wrong, or is it the yellow boat? And it's okay if you just have to take a wild guess, and then
is there even a penalty?
Or is there even a penalty? Also correct. Although, however, when you say that, I'll give Claire a little bit of a help, and we'll just say when there's contact, there is a penalty somewhere. So we'll give Claire that hint. But even if you have to take a complete guess, is it blue or yellow that would get the penalty?
Blue.
Let's see. So Claire says blue. Let's find out. And on in many cases, you would be correct. I can think of a few things as to why that might be wrong in this particular case, but let's read down and see the answer.
It's certainly possible from phase 1 for Y to shut the door on blue, but the way they do it, I think, causes them to get the foul.
Yeah, so when we roll down to look at the answer, we see it's actually the yellow boat in this case that would get the penalty. And so we go back and look at our markroom definition. So markroom, it includes room for the yellow boat to round the mark as necessary to sail her course. And when blue becomes overlapped inside her, it also requires that blue gives yellow room to sail her proper course. So in a different situation, when if this boat caught up and established overlap inside the zone, that still doesn't give them markroom, right? That's one of our more basic parts of the markroom rule that we learn. So you're looking at that snapshot at the edge of the zone, not what happens in the middle here. But the thing that makes this situation different from many other markroom situations is that this sentence right here, the yellow boat bears away more than necessary to sail to the next mark. So looking at proper course, our proper course rule, next mark's over here, so the yellow boat should be pointed this direction. There's no reason for her to point down this way unless she were going after the blue boat. So remember kind of our proper course. Often another kind of the simple way of thinking of it is, how would you sail if there were no other boats around, right? And so obviously the yellow boat wouldn't do this little dive down if the blue boat weren't here and she were trying to squeeze her out of the mark. So once there's overlap here and yellow has already got her markroom, she's been allowed to round the mark and continue in the direction she needs to go. Now it becomes a situation where it's just windward leeward, right? So the yellow boat is windward, the blue boat is leeward. We could, let's see. Yes, so the exoneration part of the rule, I was trying to see where that came in. Remember we said that the blue boat was kind of sandwiched in the middle, so they hit the yellow boat and the mark. So the blue boat hit the mark, but it was because she got pushed down by the yellow boat. So we're saying that the yellow boat broke rule 11. She broke the windward leeward rule. And if she hadn't done that, the blue boat would not have hit the mark. So she does not have to do her spin for hitting a mark. If we were to take this and look at it from a different direction and say, what if this is mark 2 of our team race course, right? So what if this was, the first mark is back here and we've sailed to the second mark, and our proper course arrow to the next mark is now pointed downwind. That is going to completely change things, and Claire's answer would be correct because yellow's proper course to the next mark is to head down this way. And so if blue has squeezed herself in there, and that is tough luck for blue, she should not have done that. So that would be, that's kind of 2 different answers there for 2 different situations. Which is why Rule 18 can be very confusing at times, And it's definitely good to be able to run through these different scenarios. Questions about that, or does that kind of make sense? So in I guess the big takeaway is that with Rule 18, a big part of what you're able to do is where is the next mark in relation. So when can you be considered to have passed that mark and headed to your new course? So this one, proper course this way, the yellow boat's already past that mark. She's on her course to the next mark. If we're going down here to a mark down to leeward, then the yellow boat has not passed the mark. She's still rounding the mark, so she still has her mark room. So that's the big difference there. All right, so very good question.
Add two things to that, Josh.
What you got, Dan?
To this bit, from Y1, I think they definitely are able to squeeze blue out of the mark, by just heading down really sharply.
Yeah,
which you might be able to might not be able to do in the boats that they're describing. But from where Y1 is, the arrow over pointing directly at the mark, they could definitely have squeezed blue out. If it was established, if they're yelling and hollering that there's no room in there when they enter that zone, like they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And then something that I know confused a lot of people a long time ago when we were explaining 18, especially at mark 3. Sometimes you use 18 to force somebody out, but then you take them beyond the proper course. Is because sometimes, especially at mark 3, you can use another rule to force somebody out. So while 18 has a proper course to it, it doesn't mean that if you don't have right of way using another rule, you still have to sail that proper course. So at mark 3, if you force somebody to go outside of you, you're on starboard as well as having mark room. So if they break overlap with you and all you have is rule 18, then you have to follow your course and jibe away. But if you overlap to leeward and you have rule 11, or they're on port and you're on starboard and you have rule 10, neither of those rules say that you have to follow your proper course. So then you're not using rule 18 anymore.
Yeah. So for anybody who wasn't quite able to follow that, remember when we're talking all those numbers, we've got the digital end course. We have our start line down here. We go up to a mark 1, and then we go left to mark 2. That situation we were just looking at was the mark 1 spot where the boats are headed for this mark. Then mark 2, they're going down. So mark 3, what Dan's talking about, is at each one of these marks, we've got the mark room rule that can help us. But even if we took that away, when we're coming into mark 3, we are setting ourselves up so that if we're the yellow boat, we have mark room, right? But even if mark room goes away, we're still on starboard tack and we're the leeward boat. So we're still in a very powerful position. In this situation, we had mark room as we were talking through our scenario. But once mark room went away, we were this yellow boat, right? We had mark room because we were clear ahead, but then there was some overlap had been established later. So if once mark room went away, then we didn't really have rights on, we didn't have anything else we could do to this guy because suddenly we were the windward boat. We were the giveaway boat, right? So that's kind of the difference there.
So another smart thing that Y could have done is, I'm assuming with the leverage that they have to be so far outstood on the ley line and that far ahead, if you position yourself directly in front of B1 instead of way high above the ley line and forward, which is pretty poor positioning, you can stop the boat. And you're still following your proper course. You're not following maybe your proper speed with your sails pulled in all the way, but the rule says course, which is heading to the next mark. So you can sail to where B2 is, just chill with your boat, and B1 then either has to run into the back of you, which is a foul, sail to leeward, jibe around and round the mark again, which is slow, or sail to windward of you, in which case you're the leeward boat. Or they just sit there, which is also good for you because forcing them to sit there and go slow is another mark trap.
Yeah, quick cut because I realized that my reply to Dan right there was in gallery view, and so my image was about this big on the screen. You couldn't really see it, so I'll replay what I said to kind of reiterate what he said at that time. So basically, this is our mark that we're talking about, that Mark 1 of the digital N team race course. He's saying if we're at a different mark, the situation could be different. If this is Mark 3, where we've already gone up and over and down, we're about to round this guy to port, turning left. So when you have the guy who's got markroom, this yellow boat here, even if we took away the markroom rule, he's still on starboard and is the leeward boat. So he's still got a lot of power. But in a different situation, such as this Mark 1 that we're talking about, the first windward and its port rounding, the boat that in this situation had the markroom becomes later on the windward boat when things got tight and squishy in that run. So if we took away markroom rule, he doesn't have any power. He's the windward boat. He can't do anything. So that markroom rule is important in these situations, in any situation, but especially here because it's the only power you have. So two things. One is, if we find ourselves in a situation, how do we fix it? We obviously don't want this guy to be able to get in here, right? If we do this, we come in here and we pretend that we didn't try to shut the door illegally and have to spin. So we keep going. That means this guy is now leeward. He's got the right of way. Also, when we get up to Mark 2, which is somewhere over that way, he's going to be the leeward boat and the inside boat of the mark. So he's going to have a lot of power. If he wants us to not go around the mark, he'll be able to make us not go around the mark. So we don't want to let this guy get in here. So we'll run through two things. One, where we realize we're in this situation. Maybe we went too far past the ley line. Maybe there's a wind shift, and we suddenly realize that we are way above the ley line, right? If we had the wind coming from the top, but then it shifted around to the left, then our original ley line, we're now above it. See how that would work, right? So for whatever reason, we found that we are above this ley line. This blue boat is right on it. We don't have overlap. So we don't want them to be able to come in to a point where we're both together, right? We don't want to see that situation that was played through. So what we're going to do instead is, we know that we will accelerate if we turn away from the wind and ease our sails out appropriately. So we're going to do that. We're going to run the shortest distance to the mark and to be able to shut that door. So two things will happen. One is, the fact that we're going faster means that we probably will draw far enough ahead to still be clear ahead of this guy the whole way. The second is, even if this guy catches up to us, now at this point, see our angle, this is still our mark room. This is still encompassed within our mark room. We're heading to our next mark, and we still have to round this mark without needing to give room to this blue boat. So he's still not going to be able to push his nose in there, right? So that's a way that if we realize we've accidentally done this, we can fix it. The next would be, how do we avoid that? How do we prevent from making that mistake? So what we're going to want to do is, instead of covering him, which maybe that was the initial intent of this yellow boat, you never know. Like we said, there's a lot of reasons you could get in that situation. But instead of trying to do that, we're going to want to tack right onto the ley line directly ahead of this guy. We don't care about not feeding in bad air because we're putting ourselves directly ahead of him in this situation. So now there's a couple things that could happen. One is, as we get up here, we may, if we are farther away from the mark but still on the ley line, we may have enough time that this bad air we're feeding him just drops him down, and he has to actually tack out or sail lower to get up there, in which case we've clearly gained on him. That's a good deal. If we're closer to the ley line, maybe it's like this. He's really going to want to hang on there. He's not going to want to have to tack out a couple boat lengths away. But we have the opportunity to put in a good mark trap here, right? So this obviously assumes that we don't have somebody coming in on starboard, but there's plenty of times when we'll be here, just the two of us. So what we can do is, as we come in here, we will slow down. We know a lot of ways we can make our boat slow down, and the markroom rule does not obviously require us to be going at full speed. this whole time. So we're able to slow down. Whoa, let's not knock the whiteboard over. As we come up here, this guy has a couple of options. One is he can run right into the back of us, break rule 12, overtaking. Instead, he's going to go to one side or the other. So if he goes below us, then we have markroom. We're able to shut him out. It's our proper course to round like this and head to the next mark. At no point in time does he have the ability to dip his nose in there. The other option is if he heads above us, or one or the other, is if he either heads above us or that makes him tack away, then we've obviously gained again on him as well. So if he just heads up, that's slowing him down massively. We can then go off around that mark and he's directly behind us. If he tacks away, that obviously gives us an even better lead because now he's doing 2 tacks while we have to just trim in and go around that mark. So it can be when you don't have a starboard boat coming in to fight you there, this can be a really powerful way to make sure that this guy stays behind you at the mark. So real good discussion on that guy, I think.
Yeah.
We are back
So
in.
slow.
Dan is slow getting back in again. Let's go. Let's see. So that was what E5. So real good discussion there. Able to talk about a whole bunch of Rule 18. So let's keep rolling through. I think at this rate, we maybe only have maybe 1 or 2 more that we do. Maybe 2 or 3, something like that. I would say no more than 3 more, probably no more than 3 more scenarios. So let's keep going down the list. We've got, let's go Hannah Davis. Pick us a letter between A and K.
C.
C, all right. Let me go
Excellent
to
choice,
D.
madame.
And let's see how many options there are. No 10, no 9, no 8, how about a 6? No 6. Oh, it's a small session. All right, pick a letter or pick a number between 1 and 5, Hannah.
4.
4. All right, let's check out C4. Looks fairly exciting. All right, so C is apparently the start of the race. So let's pull up screen share. And we've got it so it's not sharing the answer, which is always good. All right, so it looks like we have Rule 11, windward leeward. We've got Rule 16, changing course. Rule 17, proper course. All right, so again, looks like we've got a kind of big scenario. So we've got just the 2 boats between each other, yellow boat and blue boat. So before the starting signal, boat Y establishes an overlap to leeward of B from clear astern. So we see here there's no overlap there, and then they caught up and they are now overlapped. So that's one piece of information we'll take with us, is that overlap before the start was established from clear astern. After the starting signal, both boats continue on starboard tack. And boat B is keeping clear at all times. So like we've said, there are sometimes many things you have to consider when we think keeping clear, including the ability of the yellow boat to hike if necessary in a puff. But we are told in this scenario, B is doing that at all times. They've got enough distance. So 1 minute after they cross the line, the yellow boat is beginning to draw ahead a little bit. So they're still overlapped, but they're pulling ahead a little bit. Yellow boat heels to windward and luffs above close hauled. So if we remember some things we talked through team racing, that's a way that you can head upwind, head further up, point higher upwind for a short period of time. It will slow you down some, heeling to windward and heading up. The big power move in here with a boat that's got a main and a jib is you're going to luff the jib and just crank the main in, and you heel to windward, and that gives you like an extra 10 degrees of pointing with your main still working for you. And it is going to slow you down, but if you're in this might be a situation where we're just trying to get up enough so that we can kind of flush B out and make them tack away, or just push them back behind us a little bit. Or to take more of a fleet racing thing, maybe we're coming up to a mark and we realize we're just a little short of the ley line. This is a way we can kind of pinch around that windward mark. So they heel up, they go above close hauled, and B is forced to avoid them, obviously, so as to not foul as the windward boat, but they protest. So Hannah Davis, what would the call be? Is there a penalty? Is there no penalty? Who's right or wrong?
So proper course applies, and there would be a penalty. Right?
And who would receive the penalty? Who would be penalized?
Y.
Y. All right. So Hannah says Y would get a penalty. So let's check it out. Let's scroll down. Aha, we've got it. So we say we penalize Y. They establish the overlap from clear astern. So like you said, the proper course does apply. If they heel to windward to slow B without changing course. So in this case, if we were to heel to windward, which I guess another kind of a side effect of that is that you remember we said we get bad air to leeward of the boat, but we also have a bit of bad air coming off the windward side of our sails. So if we heel to windward, it causes that effect is going to go further to windward. So if our bad air coming off the windward side of our sails were at this angle before, maybe it's at this angle now, and so it's affecting B more. So if you were to do that without changing course, wouldn't break a rule. What's that, Dan?
Personally, I think that one's the way to go, especially in the FJ or most smaller boats. You heel to windward, maybe 2 or 3 degrees. It doesn't hurt you that much. And honestly, it's probably better than some people here sail normally if you're heeling to windward that little much. And you're bringing those 2 rigs of the sails closer together, and it's a really powerful spot to be. Just being near somebody to windward of you, it totally messes with their flow. And as opposed to heading up and pinching, especially 10 degrees, you keep your speed up a lot more, and you're still getting maybe 70% of the negative effects on B's sail. So you force them to tack away, and they get away from you, but then you're also keeping your speed up so you can be competitive with the other pairs on the course. But it's also something that's really good for fleet racing. As any time that you're sailing around in front of other boats, or where there aren't any boats within the immediate 2 boat lengths of you, you're going to be going faster than somebody who just has someone parallel to you. So at the starting position, right there, there'd be maybe a whole bunch of boats on the line, but if there's nobody next to you and there is somebody next to the guy to leeward of you, you're gonna be gaining. So just bringing your rig that little bit closer is worth the sacrifice of 2 degrees of windward heel all day. And then you're not changing your course, so they're not going to be able to penalize you.
Yeah, 2 things worth emphasizing there is one is like you said, obviously that kind of heading up is going to be slowing you down. So right off the start line, maybe a little heel to windward to try to get rid of the guy who's right here. That's worthwhile, trying to kind of clear your immediate vicinity as much as you can. I should have mentioned earlier when I was talking about the heel to windward and luff the jib and crank the main. That's stuff for when that's hardcore team racing mode, when we're really going pretty slow already. That's something we might do if somebody's pinning us out way past the ley line. If we're the yellow boat here, the blue boat's pushing us way past the ley line, we really need to get back to this mark. That's something we could do then to really force them to have to tack away so that we can go. So yeah, it is something that's really going to slow you down. So we really only do it when we're already going slow for some reason. But more to the point in this scenario, one thing it's important to think about is we don't want to overthink this fact that we know that before the starting signal, there's no proper course. right? But there, so right here, there's no proper course. You know, yellow would still have the right to luff blue up into the wind right here. She didn't. They started. However, the fact that proper course does not apply before the starting signal does not negate how the overlap was established, even if it was established before the starting signal. So right here, they specifically mentioned that the overlap was established from astern. So that, like we said, that does bring the proper course rule into play. And when the overlap was established, it didn't matter because proper course didn't apply. But we still have to think back to that moment in time when the overlap was established. Even though it didn't matter back then, it matters now. So we have to be able to think back in time to remember how that happened. That actually looks like there's a second question that may, it is slightly different from that. So that was worth bringing up. So we'll call you again, Hannah. Let's see, question 2. As a result of the yellow boat's luff, the boats make contact and the blue boat protests. So it looks like the same situation as the first question, only this time the boats touch. So Hannah Davis, again, we'll call you. What would the answer change? And if the answer changes, how would it change?
I mean, in terms of the penalty, no, like there's still a penalty, but yeah, I don't think it would change.
All right, let's find out. I think I have an idea.
Still waving the red flag at why?
Yeah, so this is one that will be more situational because it does depend on how the blue boat responds, right? So we've talked before about how there are times in the rules where you might be using a rule incorrectly, and so it might be your fault. But if the other boat doesn't respond correctly to the incorrect use, it can be their fault as well, right? So as you can all read there, if they could have responded to the luff, to Y's change of course, and still kept clear, but they didn't, then that is their fault. And even though the yellow boat should not have done what they did, the blue boat is still the giveaway boat. So the proper thing for the blue boat to do here is to keep clear and then to protest the yellow boat. But if they had the opportunity to keep clear, and that is where it becomes a little bit more subjective. Unfortunately, there's no real good way to turn that into a completely objective term. But if they had the ability to keep clear, but they did not, if they saw the yellow boat head up, but they continued sailing straight so that they hit each other, then actually we'll penalize both boats, right? So the yellow would get penalized for breaking rule 17, but the blue boat would get penalized for breaking rule 11, the windward-leeward rule.
Hey, Josh.
So, what's that, Jimmy?
One important thing to remember is that rule 14 never turns off. Ever.
Yes, also true. So yeah, for everybody who doesn't remember which number is which, rule 14 is avoiding collisions. So typically there is the clause in there that says if a right-of-way boat breaks the rule, but there's no damage, then they'll be exonerated. But there's nothing in there that says if a give-way boat breaks the rule and something happens, she'll be exonerated. So despite the fact that the yellow boat is using a particular rule incorrectly, they're breaking rule 17, they are still the right-of-way boat here. So if they gave the blue boat enough room, enough time to keep clear of them, then the blue boat protests. It's Y's fault for breaking that proper course rule. And if they did head up too quickly for the blue boat to avoid and they hit, then you would exonerate the blue boat. But at all times when you're the give-way boat, we need to be making sure that we're watching out for whatever might be going on with the right-of-way boat. Dan has raised his hand and lowered his hand, and no, his hand is raised. What's up, Dan?
And it's like, I think a lot of new people at team racing, especially the way we joke around and have so much fun doing it. You think it's like with all the joking about being aggressive and screwing over the other guy and making him hurt, taking him to China as much as possible, and how many rules breaks go on. Or especially now that we're doing so much e-sailing, where it really is about sticking penalties to the other person. It's really easy to forget. And if you watch some like high-level team racing videos, even those guys sometimes forget. Like the spirit of the rules is, at the end of the day, to keep everybody safe on the water and keep it organized, spirit of sailing and all that. So that's why it's important to always remember, like Mr. Yurko said, Rule 14, easiest rule in the rule book, never turns off. And it's not about, and it shouldn't be about trying to give somebody else a penalty or force them to take one. Like in some other sports where you can force somebody to take a penalty, especially real life sailing is not about that. And you shouldn't try to think about forcing penalties on somebody, but thinking about just using the rules to give yourself an advantage.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good distinction. We describe team racing as we're 3 boats against 3 boats, and your team is trying to either sail faster or slow the other team down. They're not trying to either sail faster or give the other team more penalties, right? So we're using what Dan just said. We're using all these different rules to give ourselves an advantage, not to just make us win because the other team was spinning so much. So that is a good distinction. All right, I think we got time for one more. Let's go through. Let's see, John, give us a letter between A and K.
I.
Oh, actually, I should have mentioned, since I looks like 1, there is no I. So you actually have to pick something between A and K that's not I.
H.
All right. Let us check out H and see how many choices we have. H. Oh, looks like a little bit of a smaller one. So you have a choice choose a number between 1 and 4.
1.
1. All right, H1. Let's find that. Make sure we're not showing the answer. All right, looks like we are in. This is downwind at a mark. Whereas this is not necessarily something on our digital end course. Let me pull up the figure. This is just a general idea of what's going on at a random jibe mark. So in this case, looks like we're not going to a offset mark that's over here or something. We are going around. We're rounding to rounding to starboard. So we're turning right as we go around it. But it looks like we continue going in a downwind direction. So the principles will all still stay the same. It's just this is not a direct correlation to any mark on a digital end course we use. So we've got B and X and Y. So again, X and Y are on the same team. B is on the other team. They're approaching a jibe mark directly astern. So we're looking at this picture right now, question 1. So again, remember, keep in mind our different numbers. So we've got Y1, B1, and X1. Nobody is overlapped with anybody else at this point. X gets into the zone. So we can see if we were to imagine where X's bow would be there, they're crossing into the zone, or maybe have just crossed right here. So at that point, the blue boat is directly astern of X, so there's no mark room for blue. They slow themselves down because again we are team racing, so they are trying to force blue to go around them because they know blue can't go on the inside. So they stop themselves, and it literally says stop, so they must be really good at slowing their boat down. The yellow boat bears away, so now we're moving to position 2. So yellow boat, blue boat, X, or this guy, they bear away. The boat Y, I guess we'll say Y and X instead of yellow, so we can tell who's who. So Y bears away, B bears away, And at this point, B and Y are overlapped. So once we hit the zone here, it looks like the yellow boat will have markroom on, or it looks like Y will have markroom on B, but B will not have markroom on X. So once that happens, the blue has gone below X, and Y is going below B. And B or X is not obligated to give B any markroom, but B is obligated to give Y markroom. The problem is right now they're stuck because B can't head up because X is right there, and B can't head down and jibe out because Y is right there. And if they jibe, they'll be denying Y their markroom. So to fix the situation, Y bears away to avoid B, and they protest. So what would the call be? And this is actually a really nice confusing one. So John, see if you can give us a guess of what our answer would be.
I must say that I do think B3 could head up and avoid X3.
Well,
they could do it. But
that's a separate question. I would agree with you, but we'll get to that one in a second. But John, give us a random guess. What would happen here?
Is there even a penalty?
Penalized blue?
Is there a penalty? Is there no penalty? If there is a penalty, who's wrong? Did I hear John? Somebody said something.
Penalized blue?
What's that?
Penalized B?
All right, so John guesses we're going to give B a penalty. So let's scroll down and find out. So answer 1, no penalty. And I don't remember the number, but I have a good idea of why this would be, but let's read through it. So right here, if we were to go and look at, actually, let's real quick go to definitions. Let's read the definition of obstruction, because I don't think we've read that out before. So right here, obstruction is an object that a boat could not pass without changing course substantially if she were sailing directly towards it. And some other words that don't look super relevant right now. Object committed. So a boat racing is not an obstruction to other boats unless they are required to keep clear of her. Vessel underway, including a boat racing, is there a continuing obstruction? Okay, cool. So that's the part of the definition that's relevant to us. This is a boat racing that X is a boat racing that B is required to keep clear of. That makes her an obstruction under the rules. So they're both required to keep clear also under Rule 12. So Rule 12 is just coming from astern, right? They were directly behind her. They're not allowed to run into the back of her. B and Y must each give X markroom. Yeah, so we only mentioned B, but obviously Y as well does not have markroom on X because she's also not overlapped. So at position 1, B has right of way over Y, and that would again be because of Rule 12. At position 1, Y is directly astern of B. And Rule 19.2a, we won't read through that right now, but it basically, in more fleshed out terms, says what I've highlighted. B has the right of way between these two boats, between B and Y. So B is allowed to choose which side of X she passes on. She's allowed to choose whether she goes on this side, the leeward side, or the windward side. In this case, she chose to go on the leeward side, to go down here. So when that happens, and now Y has become overlapped, so there is something like these two boats are kind of connected. What happens, right? So when that happens, Y, we'll scroll down and keep reading, must give room to B under Rule 19.2b. So again, this rule about passing obstructions, that part we again won't read through it right now, but it does say that once B chooses where they want to go, Y will have to give them room to go there. So that also means they must give B the room to give X markroom. So in a slightly specific situation, right, it's not going to be very often that you have to give an obstruction markroom. But in this case, that's what happened. So once B has chosen to go on this side, Y is required to give them the room they need to keep doing what they need to do, which in this case means they have to give X mark room. So is that the end of it? No, here we got more. Cool. I was thinking that we should also have a little more explanation. So once they become overlapped, right-of-way changes. So now they have passed X, so they're no longer an obstruction, but X still has mark room. So now they are both required to give room to X, and Y, in order to let B give room to X, will need to, or I said that really oddly, Y will need to give B room to stay out of the way of X. So if that requires jibing away or whatever, then that still needs to happen. Once this situation changes to the effect that X has gone around and now Y and B need to round the mark, B would still owe mark room to Y if they were overlapped at the zone. Once they do their little spinny or whatever has to happen for X to be able to go around the mark first, then it looks like Y still has mark room if they stay in the zone, right? And if this is going to get, if I keep talking through the situation, it's going to get really confusing because we could get into a lot of what ifs, like what if one of them tacks but the other doesn't, and in that case marker moves away. So we won't push the situation any farther than that. But the point being that once this happens, once B chooses to go on this side of X, Y does owe them the room to stay clear of X and not cut away X's mark room. So really nice and confusing. Let's see if we can look at question 2 as well. So we've got this situation. We'll see if we can scroll back and forth between the question and, oh, nice. It is a nice short question. So B and Y are overlapped. We'll look at which ones those are. B and Y are overlapped when B reaches the zone of the mark. How does this limit the boat's actions? So if we scroll up here, so we've got B and Y when, oh, so basically the same thing we're trying to talk through. Okay, cool. So we can work through this. So B, like we said before, when they duck down here, B and Y get into the zone and Y is overlapped. So the B owes mark room to X and to Y. So how does this limit the actions of B and of Y, of either one? And we'll give John a break. We won't make him try to explain this. If anybody has a good thought on this, let's hear it. I'm expecting one person in particular to chime in.
I think it makes it really less confusing because they've split it up into the two questions here.
I would agree.
Like first phase is B has the right to choose which side of the obstruction they go on. They choose to pass to leeward. Y honors that. And then second phase, they've now entered a mark, and then B, within the best of her ability, has to then let both X and Y round the mark. So the limitations are B can't hit X, but they also can't force Y out of the mark if they can avoid it.
Yeah, sounds pretty reasonable. Let's see what we've got down here. Let's see. So like we said before, B and Y are required to give X mark room. Y must also give B room to pass between her and X because X is an obstruction. So that was kind of what we talked through a little earlier. So when B enters the zone, she's overlapped outside Y, and the mark room rule requires her to give Y mark room, whether or not the overlap between them is broken later on. So like we said, remember we take that snapshot at the zone, and when we took that snapshot, then Y was the inside boat. So that doesn't matter what happens later on, with a few exceptions, which we may get into right here. We'll see what they say. But typically, once you're the inside boat, you're the inside boat. Now, one of the exceptions here, if B has been unable to give markroom from the time the overlap began, she's not required to give markroom. However, if she's able to give Y markroom by slowing and then passing behind X, then she has to do that. So if there's anything reasonably possible for B to do to give that markroom to Y, she needs to do it. Obviously, even if that means, giving up a little bit of distance that she had or whatever, slowing herself down, if that's possible for her to do, she'll need to do that in order to give the yellow boat or Y, in order to give Y the markroom. One thing we can note here, the presence of X may mean both B and Y have to pass on the wrong side of the mark. And if that's the case, they are obviously not exonerated from rounding that mark. It means they have to go back and go around it the correct way. So we could get into, we could keep talking through what I kind of started going into earlier, where one of the things that does break markroom is if one boat tacks inside the zone around the mark. So in this particular case, you can write on. Interesting. I didn't know you could put words up there. In this particular case, if both boats did end up going on the wrong side of the mark, it is pretty likely that they would have to tack at that point, both of them. And so markroom would kind of go away and maybe reestablish if they both tacked. But so there very easily could be, if the blue boat is not able to, head up behind X to give her markroom, and they're both, B and Y are forced to go down here, there very easily could turn into a situation where they both have to go around and tack and come back. And in that case, it's kind of whoever's closest at this point. So maybe that kind of turns into B gets to round first. But there's just too many what ifs in that scenario for me to say what would actually happen there. So the main point being, if you owe somebody markroom, you need to do what you can reasonably do to give them that markroom. But if it is totally impossible for you to do that, that is a thing where you could get exonerated. So if we kind of change the situation and this boat, all three of these guys were completely overlapped and X did not give room for B or Y to go around, then even despite the fact that B owes Y markroom, that would probably be a time where they would be exonerated because X was physically crowding them out. Obviously, that would be a penalty for X in that specific scenario, but it could be a situation where B would get exonerated for not giving markroom to Y because they just physically weren't able to. So that's kind of the opposite side of that rule. All right, so that was some real nice confusing stuff to end on.